It's Chelsea.
It's Nina.
And you're in the Critic's Kingdom.
Hey, this week we are coming to you guys with the Hanukkah classic.
Full Court Miracle.
Yes.
I loved this one when I was a kid. Love. Like the dreidel song.
The dreidel
was my.
Yes.
I think I used to sing it in the car, like not on the radio, not along with anything. I just sing it in the car, and I can imagine that my parents were probably like, "What is happening? Like literally, what is she doing?"
Yes.
But I used to eat it up, and I always got like this, and yes, Ultimate Christmas Present, but mostly this is why I was excited for holiday season on Disney Channel. I would watch it even after I sort of grew out of Disney Channel. I would revisit it because I really enjoyed it when I was a kid.
Yeah, no, I remember I really liked it. It came out in 2003, during, I think, the week of Hanukkah that year. And, yeah, I mean, I think it's just like it's a cute film overall.
Yes. So, Full Court Miracle. This is the story of Alex, played by the iconic Alex D. Linz.
Yes.
Max
Keeble's big move.
He was a big deal.
Yeah. He was like a thing when we were growing up.
Yeah, for real. And
it boy.
I remember like being little and being like, he's kind of short, but
yeah.
I love him. You know what I mean? Like it's like the way I felt about like Taj Mowry. Like I was really small. I was like, I think I'm in love with him. Yeah, he was definitely an child of our generation for sure. So in this, his story is, so he's Jewish, and he goes to the Hebrew Academy in Philadelphia. That's where the story takes place. He is the son of a doctor and a real estate
developer / yeah, no, he like develops
real estate.
He builds stuff. Yeah.
But his mother's a primary breadwinner. Yeah. She's a doctor, and she really wants him to sort of follow in her footsteps and become a doctor. But Alex really loves basketball, and that's what this whole Full Court Miracle film was about.
It's all about
is Alex and his love of basketball. So we actually sort of start out with. We learn in class with Alex the story of Judah and the Maccabees, which is the parable that inspires the holiday Hanukkah.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess, a quick, for anyone who doesn't know that story, quickly, Judah and the Maccabees, they were essentially fighting against the Roman Empire. They're essentially driven into the hills, sort of pushed like really, really far back. They're losing, and they take refuge, in a cave because, think about, that whole idea of like home court advantage. Like they know the terrain really well. They essentially take refuge in a cave. And the thing is that they sort of have to wait out this army, and there's only light in the oil. Sorry, only oil in the lamp.
Yeah. They only have a set amount, like a little bit.
To light the cave for a single night. And everybody's sort of freaking out about it. Judah, to his troops, I guess, to his people, have faith. God will provide. The lamp miraculously burns for 8 nights, not just one. And that is why at Hanukkah, 8 candles are lit over the course of 8 nights, the lights continuously burning to symbolize, to represent, to remember that miraculous night, where that miraculous period of time that gave the Maccabees enough strength, enough faith, enough resurgence to be able to fight the Roman Empire and win. So that's the basic story of there. That's the influence of Hanukkah. And that is the story that we learn at the beginning of this. And then, but as we're learning this story, little Alex, who is focused only on his basketball potential and prowess, we get this really great, what I like to call, these shots like the Assassin's Creed flashes of this film. And it sort of positions Alex, we see Alex and his friends facing off against like another group of slightly taller, average average, slightly taller, preteen boys, like 13, 14, in like ancient garb.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex and his friends dressed like the Maccabees. The other boys dressed in like centurions, and they're on a basketball court. It's fantastic, and they're just sort of facing off against each other. So obviously, the huge metaphor being here, Alex is Judah with his Maccabees, and they are up against the wall. They're up against the wall because of this tournament that is apparently played with various leagues and school, or the league of the schools in Philadelphia, and they are the worst team in the league. His school's team is the worst team in the league, and that kind of sucks because Alex is apparently quite good, but again, he's just on a bad team,
right?
And he is just like, this is our year. We have to do better. We can't come in last again because it's on our home court. Like, this is where it's at. So again, that Judah the Maccabees metaphor goes pretty deep, pretty thin. Goes pretty deep. His mom's really trying to keep things in perspective for him. She's like, listen, like, you are not very big, and you are you're probably not going to grow anymore. You have to start thinking realistically. Basketball is this hobby. It's great that you like it, but you're smart. You can be so much more. You should be a doctor like me. That whole shebang. And his dad is clearly like a little bit more supportive. After his mom gives him that whole speech and leaves, he plays basketball with him, and they have like a cute little dad-son moment. But so Alex is stressed about the basketball team, and he visits, the rabbi who runs the school to ask him essentially for advice and like to get him a better coach, because their coach is the science teacher, Mr. Simowitz, who is not very good at his coaching job. And I don't know, his rabbi essentially just gives him like some esoteric ass advice and is like, essentially, go find your way and have faith. So then they're practicing on sort of a street court in Philadelphia, him and his friends, and they see who we will come to learn is Lamont Carr practicing on the basketball court. And Alex's reading of this moment is, oh my goodness, God has sent us a Judah. Like, that's what's happened. Like, this is like that faith part of it. So he convinces Lamont with money, like out of his own pocket. I think it's $20 per hour that he coaches them to coach them after school,
right,
on this lot. And they like don't actually have the money to do this. Like, they're children, so obviously they have to get their money for the parents. So he also decides to sell his Dr. J card that he got for his bar mitzvah. That's like a big deal that his parents like paid a lot of money for. But while this is happening, his mom decides, she's like, you know what? I got you an internship working at the hospital every day after school for a week, or twice after school for a week, because again, I think you need to start focusing on your like actual future, and it's not basketball. It's impossible for it to be basketball.
Right.
And Alex is kind of really upset about it. He talks to this about what seems to be, they position it as if she is his best friend.
Yeah.
But she doesn't. She is Latinx. She does not go to his school. Her name is Julie, played by the wonderful Cassie Steele.
Mm-hmm.
So I will probably end up referring to her as Manny throughout this more often than not. If you don't know that reference, just look it up. I don't have the time today. But Manny is essentially like Julie. Manny is essentially like, what? That's amazing. Why wouldn't you want to? I would kill for that type of opportunity. You're so lucky. The whole shebang. He's like, wait, that's excellent. How about you just go to the hospital? And I will continue to play my basketball. And she's like, all right, if you're really about it, go ahead, fine. Even though, like, how would his parents not find out?
Yeah, his mom should know immediately.
Yeah. Like, that don't make no sense.
That he didn't show up,
but okay, little person. So Lamont has been training them, and Lamont's been drilling them, right? Like, he's getting these boys ready. He has them running, he has them doing,
they're in conditioning.
They're deep conditioning, and they do need it. They really do. But, Alex sort of says to him, listen, you're not making it fun anymore. Like, you're taking all the fun out of this basketball thing, and I love this game no matter what. You love this game no matter what. We feel that. My boys don't necessarily feel that.
Right.
So can you ease up a bit? Like, yeah, I want you to get us ready for this tournament and we need you, but like, we gotta still keep it fun to keep them motivated. And, Lamont's sort of like, all right, bet. So he teaches them to shoot. And it's a really cute scene of him, teaching them how to shoot a basketball, because most of them cannot do that. And we understand why Alex is stressed. But they're still like having money troubles, even after he sells his Dr. J card. So they decide to, well, actually, I don't know if they decide to. Alex steals his parents' espresso machine and has set it up outside of the synagogue.
Yes.
And is literally selling everybody that walks by that synagogue into that synagogue coffee in the morning with his little ragtag team of friends, until one of the teachers or administrators, it seems, at the school pulls
Mrs.
up
Klein.
Mrs. Klein, and she's like, what are y'all doing? And they give her some story, and then she goes, and again, of course, why they think this would happen, she immediately calls his mother and is like, did you give him permission to do this? And she's like, well, no. So now his parents are involved, and everybody's parents are involved, and they're like, what do you mean you've been letting a stranger teach you basketball in the park and paying him money? That's crazy. That'll make no damn sense. So they're like very upset about it, and Alex is like, no, but like, trust us a little bit. He's a good guy, did the whole thing. The rabbi really likes basketball too, so he's like, you know what? I'm gonna help you out with this. And they essentially invite Lamont over for Seder.
Yeah.
I think it's Seder. Yeah, it's Seder one night.
I think it's Seder.
Yeah, they've invited him over for dinner. Whether or not Seder is debatable, or we don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But they invite him over for dinner. They have their little conversation. It's sweet. His mom is still a bit guarded about it, but it is somewhat because they don't know Lamont, but it is mostly because she doesn't want Alex playing basketball. That's really what it is. But essentially they come to a agreement that Lamont, who is in Philadelphia because he's hoping to get a call from the Sixers to try out for the team, that he will coach the kids at the school after school until he gets that call. And that, the school will, pay him and all. It'll just be more sanctioned than instead of children handing him money out of his pocket, which makes sense. That is a sensible thing to happen.
Right.
But the problem with this is, and the rabbi figures it out, is that, and Alex knows it, is that Lamont lives in his car. Lamont doesn't have a place to live, and he lies on he leaves it blank on his application form, but Miss Klein is nosy, so she's like, I need more information, which again, she's in the right with that. You are an administrator, these are children, you have to know that information about somebody. If somebody's leaving information off an application, that is a huge red flag. So she's very right. What she ends up doing is tailing Lamont to figure out where he lives, and because the rabbi knows this is coming, and Alex's dad has this property, they work out a situation where Alex's dad essentially lets him use one of his open condos until things get on their feet, and Lamont in exchange agrees to fix up the condo because that's part of why he can't really sell it or get it out of the place. They also find out that Alex, nicknamed Schlotz, which is fun. I think his last name is Schlotsky.
Schlotsky, yeah.
Schlotsky, so they call him Schlotz. He's failing history, and so he's stressed about that because if he fails history, he failed the history test, and that means he can't play on the team. And his mom is now on his ass, I told you this was a waste of your time, and it's distracting you. So he's very stressed, which makes him be a dick to Manny. So they have a little bit of falling out in the middle of this. And his teammates are also stressed because they're like, yo, if you are not playing, we are definitely losing. So they help him, get his history grade. They help him prepare for his retake of the history test. And it's this whole thing about how he can only think with a ball in his hand. That's why he can remember stats and all that stuff, but he can't remember dates. So while he's dribbling and practicing, they sort of feed him dates and names and all of that so that he can retake the test. And then while he's retaking the test, physically doing that, Lamont is with all the other guys at practice, and they're essentially just well, we can't do anything because Alex isn't here. He's like, that'll make no sense. Alex might be the head of this team, but like, you need a whole body to survive. So we gonna figure out what everybody else's talent is. Like, one of them he figures out is trash talking. One of them he figures out is rebounding. One of them, he's mad tall, so he's got this like great like hook shot that he can do. One of them is a hothead who just needs to learn to calm down. So he's told to think of like his crush that he has. And it all seems to be going well, but then, Lamont tries out for the Sixers, and then he gets a call to join the Sixers for 10 days. And that happens to be over the tournament. And Alex is very, very upset about that. But Lamont is like, listen, that's the deal we made. And I got to do this. His family's not with him. His family's back in Virginia. He has a wife and a small son who's supposed to be 5. And he's like, I got to do this for my family. I got to get the money. Like, life is real. Okay, fair enough. So, the tournament starts. They're actually doing very well in the tournament with Alex leading this team, and they get all the way to the finals. Now, the finals, they're facing off against their rivals, who essentially just taunt them. They're the centurion-dressed teenagers that come in and out of the film. And, the night before the finals, Alex has a heart-to-heart with his mom, where he sort of tells her, listen, like, we also see that she doesn't really come to his games and stuff like that. And he's like, listen, like, I wouldn't love you any less if you were or were not a doctor. Like, can you not try to change me? Right. Can you trust me a little bit? Like, I'm not dumb. I know that this may not be the path for me, but in all fairness, it's fair. Like, he could be a coach. He could be whatever. But just trust me a little bit. And she's like, I bet. So the next day, it's the final game, and there's this big rainstorm. There's a big rainstorm going on. And they're playing well. They're sort of keeping up with this team to an extent. But, gaps. And we see that his mom and Manny,
Julie,
whatever, are at the hospital. They're leaving, and his mom, and she's essentially just like, all right, fine, I'll go to this game, even though he's being a little bit of a dick. And his mom's like, okay, great, I gotta stop and do something first, but, like, you go ahead. We see that what she's actually stopping to do is to sort of, like, go and grab Lamont and be like, listen, come to this game, because his game's already over. So she gets Lamont and is bringing him to the court. Meantime, they're playing, and the lights go out because of the rainstorm. They all go out to see, and the backup generator comes on. They all go out to, like, look at the generator, see what's going on, and they see that there's only so much time left on the meter before the generator stops working, which means that, like, the lights will permanently go out. And they make a deal with the other team that whichever team is ahead when the lights fail will be the team that wins, no matter if there's still time on the clock. The science teacher, the basketball coach, kind of stays out there to calculate it. And they go back in, they start playing. When he comes in with the calculated number, he tells them, okay, there are 2 minutes and 45 seconds left on the meter, but there's 5 minutes left on the clock. So they have 2 minutes and 45 seconds to, like, come back and, like, win this. So they're playing. They're pretty much about to lose. The other team hears how much time is left, so they try to run it down with a timeout. And the lights do go off, but then they miraculously come back on. And, Lamont is there, and Lamont's there, like, cheering them up and, like, helping them out, And a huge part of this also is, that they sort of redid their, like, in addition to it being on their home court, Lamont redid their strategy of playing ball by making their offense their defense. I believe that's the way it goes. So it's a full court press that they play, hence the title, Full Court Miracle. Lights go out, but miraculously the light is on. They play through the full 5 minutes. Alex has had a problem with being a ball hog because he don't trust nobody on his team. In the last second, he trusts enough to pass the ball after he's, like, laid it up and done all the right things. And then homie with the hook shot hits it. It's very Friday Night Lights, all the coloring, all the flashing. And then there are screams of joy as they win. And then the sort of true ending of the story is, like, Lamont gets offered a permanent coaching position at the school. They decide to actually have, build a basketball program. And it ends with Lamont and his wife and child have been brought up, shocker, by Alex's mom. And it's Lamont and his wife and his son, who is in theory 5. That child is way too big to be a 5-year-old. He's at least 8. And Alex and his dad and his mom, they're, shooting hoops out behind the house. And that is full court miracle.
Yeah. So I guess to get into the review portion, I mean, I feel like we have Julie, aka Manny.
She's not a Julie. There's nothing about that girl that says her name is Julie. She's
just
obviously Manny.
So iconic as Manny, and I'm sure actors hate that, but like, wow, what a role.
What a role.
Cassie Steele deserves.
Yeah, man.
For
but, sure.
I think this one is also very interesting because it's the only DCOM that we've seen that's like religiously focused, but like not just as a background. Like the religion is not just a background type character or like something that's like briefly mentioned here or there. It's like actually in the foreground. Like the whole thing is literally based off of a parable in the Torah. Like so it's like very much grounded in the religious part of it. And even the fact that he goes to a religious school, like he goes to the Hebrew Academy in Philly. He doesn't just go to like a public school and then goes to like Jewish school on like after school's over, So I think that part was interesting. And I think this is also Disney's only real foray into this.
Yeah, it's the only one that I can think of. I don't know.
Unless we're missing a new one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unless something happens sort of after we both stopped watching, and it's something that we'll catch up to.
Yeah, but I haven't heard of anything, because the only other one we could think of was like Let It Shine, but Let It Shine is not like... It's like based on like a story, but nothing to do with the Bible specifically. It just happens to take place in a church, and they made him the son of a preacher.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. Like this one is very much like that's the focus of the film.
Yeah. Which is, it's interesting, I think, there are a few different perspectives to consider that from. I think it is, I like it as a juxtaposition, right? Like this, I think that, because, all right, let me center myself. So I think that at its core, this is a sports film, right? Like that's what this movie is. I think that in mainstream media, many American sports films, actually do tend to have a religious coding to them.
They're very Christian.
Yeah, they're sort of, they're sort coded. Of like, just, a light slap, a first layer of paint.
Yeah.
That just coats like the background. Like you think about Remember the Titans, and you even think about like Secretariat, and like there's just like these films where like people's religion obviously plays a role in the story, in sportsmanship and all these things. And it's Christian.
Yeah.
It's Christian. It's the dominant American religion.
Yeah.
Although I don't even know how that percentage I don't know what that percentage is like.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Quite honest
now.
But in theory, in the times that this is happening, it's
definitely for a lot of our country's history.
Yeah, it's or Anyway, y'all know it's complicated.
Before it became,
Yeah, it's and I do sort of like that there exists even if it's for kids, even if it's small, like that is coated with something other than Christianity. Because I do actually think that, and I said this like earlier, Chelsea, when we were just discussing this, before we got on, that I think generally speaking, like Judah and the Maccabees in particular is like it's a parable that I've always liked, generally speaking, but it's a good parable for children in particular. I think that there are just elements of it that it's easy for kids to digest, and it's dealing with like big things, but in a way that they can understand, so they can like interact with big things and big concepts of like what is leadership, what is faith, what is like how does one fight, like they can interact with all of those sort of meta thoughts, but on a like easy to digest scale. So there's certainly that with this film, for sure, that I liked about it, in terms of like the fact that I just like that it's not a Christian sports film. That being said, though, I am curious as to sort of there's an obvious impetus in the fact that, we make all these Christmas films, like we've got to make a Hanukkah film.
Right.
Right? But I am curious about, like, because it's the only one that exists.
Yeah.
It's the only religious film that Disney Channel Original Movies has made, as far as we can tell. So, like, I'm curious as to why it, like, not why it exists, but, like, how, like I said, sort of the impetus of its creation.
Yeah, and
if that makes sense. Like, I'm
Yeah.
kind of shocked that it, and maybe it is because it's a parable and not a straight story from the Bible, but I am a little bit surprised from the Bible,
from the Torah. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I was like,
It's like not wrong.
I do that
but...
from the Old Testament.
Yeah,
I had a whole thing with, like, reading the story Bible as literature, so I associate, like, anyway, doesn't matter, it's personal. The point being, like, maybe that's why, like, because it's not technically, like, hardcore, like, religion. Like, it's not as rooted as, like, Moses. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not the Prince of Egypt.
Well, I mean, I also think with most religious texts, they use parables in order to get you to get whatever the lesson is supposed to be. So I feel like those are obviously the easiest ways to communicate that, and especially for kids, it's like everybody knows the story of the prodigal son, and like that kind of, and that's like a story from a parable from the Bible. So it's like I get that, but yeah, I do think it's an interesting question about, like, the choice to, what was, like, the thought processing behind, like, oh, like, let's make this movie about Hanukkah, but not make it a secularized version, because I feel like a lot of the Christmas films, none of them are really based in the church, but it's also different with, like, anything that's, like, Christian, because it's like, it's basically in America, it pretty much is always surrounding you, like, you can't escape it. Because it's just like it may not even be like the predominant religion in terms of like what people actually practice numbers wise these days, but it's definitely the one that's like predominant in like media and culture.
Yeah, it's a part of Americana.
It's literally a part of Americana. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think that's also, an interesting thing that this is the one that they chose to be like specifically focused around the religion and the culture of it. And all of that.
Do you think part of it has to do with like a teaching moment from their perspective? Like the idea of like even the way that like we did at the top of this podcast, where this idea of we have to explain to people what Hanukkah is.
Yeah,
I mean, because most people who are not Jewish
don't know
what Hanukkah is or why Hanukkah.
Yeah, no, like I never knew this. I never knew the story behind Hanukkah. Like I knew that you had the candles and that it lasted for X amount of days, but like I didn't know like the specific parable that like inspired it. So yeah, it's like I don't think people don't normally, again, Americana, people don't, like your average person, it does not really learn about like a lot of other religions, if we're being honest, like outside of just learning like these are the three big Abrahamic religions: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, like, and knowing those three things, but you don't really know much beyond that in terms of like what are the different holidays that they celebrate, what's the reason behind said holidays, like
why do they use different calendars, why do they like
where did they begin, or like what's the name of the text, like you might know the name of some of the like the texts maybe, but I don't know. I just feel like there's definitely like a educational gap when it comes to religion in this country.
Oh, for sure.
And I think then that does bring up the other point of just like, does Disney have a responsibility to now represent other religions in some sort of decom? I think aside from Christianity, because that's more than overrepresented. We don't need that. Like nobody needs that. Like it's because
I don't want to already Jesus camp.
Well, yeah, because it's like it also already exists. Like there's a whole genre of film that's literally like they call them faith based, but they're all Christian. Like it's like they're literally Christian based films. So it's like you don't need a decom about that. Like we get that more than enough from like everything. So it's like, but do we think that like they should have a story centered around like a Muslim practicing family or a Muslim child or like, all of that, or like, any other religion too, like a Hindu kid. And like, I do think you didn't get into like that question of like, if you're going to do one, why weren't others also um done?
I think that that's a fair question. Um, Sort of like from the perspective, really, of just like the representation of it,
Yeah.
because like it is, what is, you're right, what is their responsibility? Because I think that there's one side of it where you can say that, just the idea that like no one, like you don't have to, the whole idea of catering to diversity for the sake of catering to diversity, boggles us down into minutia that maybe won't allow us to like actually tell stories, or won't allow us to actually like get some great things out there, because we're too busy crossing I's and dotting T's to make sure that nobody's left out. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the danger of too much inclusion, if that makes sense. But generally speaking, that tends to be language of oppressors, and that tends to be kind of bullshit. Like there is room
for everybody
to do it all, and it's like, it's a studio. It's not like it's a broke studio. It's not like they're hurting for cash.
Well, it's also like if you do so many other movies, like I just don't.
You've made 3 million sports movies.
Yeah,
that's like the thing. Like you made, like you couldn't make, like even in a sports movie or in another type of film, like you couldn't make one, like make the backdrop for one of those it's a Muslim character who's going through it, like, or a Hindu character, or a Buddhist character, or a Wiccan character, like just a small other things, that are not fundamentally focused surrounding dominant religions in this particular country.
No, I completely agree, because I'm just like, I'm sure there's been plenty of stories like where you could have just like, because we ended up finding out that this one was actually inspired by a true story. And I'm just like, I think there's so many instances where you could have done the same thing for like a Muslim character or a Hindu character or a Buddhist character, or any other religion. And it just makes me think of like that guy, I forgot his name, so forgive me for that, but there was, I think, like the first like oh gosh, he was like one of the like first like Muslim, and I think he was Pakistani basketball players at like University of Maryland, and it was like a really big thing, like 10, like not even 10 years ago, sorry, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. And it's like something like that, like it's like you could use that to inspire a story and be like, let's talk about when he was a kid. And especially with this one being inspired by a real life story of like Lamont Carr was an actual person. He was actually the first African American to ever graduate from University of Virginia in the 70s. And then he became this basketball coach much later on, and coached this like Jewish day schools like basketball team to glory. And they based this off him. But even with that, it was like, they also didn't even tell you that, like we had to look that up and find out that like he was an actual person who did like these cool things, and it's like in the annals of history.
Yeah, which is interesting, because I wonder if that means that, I wonder how, like if this film wildly differs from whatever happened in real life, that they like couldn't put inspired by, or based on, like they couldn't do that because I feel like that's something that they would have capitalized on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's just potential to like explore that if anybody wants to, and let us know.
Yeah.
But that to be said, I still really enjoyed this film, and I did really love it when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, I think that part of the reason that I loved it is because I did clock it as representation of like not groups that were not as seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated that growing up in New York, you know, and you know my own personal sort of history. I have like I've had a lot of close contact with Judaism and you know Jewish people in the way of like whole neighborhoods, in the way of classmates, in the way of mentors. You know, like it's just been a culture that I've been a culture and a religion that I've very much been sort of next to.
You've like come across, yeah,
like
quite
and
a
like
lot.
at sometimes even walked in step with my whole life. So I very much I think clocked onto this, latched onto this, and then of course you know hip hop dreidel song. So I think I very much and it seemed it takes place in Philly, which makes sense. But I remember when I was little, I clocked it as New York.
Yeah, and I read it as the same when
Yeah,
I was
because
younger.
you know it just seemed very multi. Like even there's a moment I think when they're like after they walk to school together, Schlots and Manny, Julie, where they're saying goodbye, and I think she goes like hasta luego, and he goes shalom, and it's like I think that's something that I fully clocked rewatching it, but I think when I was younger, that made sense, like that was normal, and I was used to that kind of interaction, that type of melting of worlds. Like I have friends who went to they went to Jewish school after school was done. You know what I mean? Like I sort of grew up next to that, so I very much did clock this as like representation in that way. But again, I know that I'm quite lucky that my scope is wide enough where like this was representation that felt like it applied to me to a certain degree. So I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt like people I knew were seen and heard. But that is not something that is necessarily the case for everybody. And so, you know, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna come down as hard as, because I don't know how I come down on like artist responsibility generally speaking. It's a complicated issue for me. And I do think I tend to lean more in the not so popular realm of, you know, not having that much responsibility per se. Like it's not their responsibility to like make sure you're okay with what they produce. Or, you know, it's not their responsibility to do anything but just produce the art. You know what I mean? Like who they are as a person doesn't have anything to do with like all of that. So I don't know if I fully come down saying that like I think that it's their responsibility to create that content, but I do think if they are going to claim any type of morality, and I'm using that very loosely, any type of morality, then like it does then sort of fall into that jurisdiction of like, so you should have done this, you should have been done it, it's been 17 years.
Yeah.
And like it's strange, this is an odd one-off to have.
Well, and I think my general view always comes down to the fact that I'm like, obviously Disney's a corporation at the end of the day. Like, we know what it is. All they care about is the dollar. But I do think that you get to a point where you start, like, it's not so much do you have a responsibility to tell this story? It's more of, are you accepting people when they're trying to tell this story? Because that's where I always come back to, is I'm like, I'm 100% sure that sometime in this past 17 years, there has been somebody who's like, oh, let's tell a like story of like a girl that wears a hijab and plays soccer, or, you know, like something like that, or like, let's tell the story of like this little Buddhist boy. I don't know, but like, or well, or like, you know,
running track,
or
maybe?
like,
I don't know.
Yeah, like, you know, just some like kid doing whatever that practices whatever, and we can have it. Or like, let's do like a movie about like Hinduism, and like it can be all centered on Diwali, like just something like that, where I'm like, I'm 100% sure that somebody has come to you with this story ready, and then for some reason you have not accepted it, or they're not even able to get to the point where they can get to you, which is another issue. Where it's like, where's the pipeline? Because I'm like, there's no reason. Like, I'm like, there's so many things that you could have done that again, if you're going to do one, and then if all of your other ones are going to be kind of like housed under the general like Christianity umbrella, it's kind of like, okay, but you can also like throw something to the other girls, and especially with most of them being like, I don't think you have to only do dominant religions, but I think especially when they're like some of the biggest ones that are now in the US, there's kind of no excuse.
Yeah, and I do also wonder with I do on like sort of the other side, like kind of what we talked about with Wendy Wu Homecoming Warrior.
Warrior.
Waldia. Sort of to what level this as a film, because it is like there is a lot of showcasing in this, you know, and it is a thing of, you know, okay, is that someone choosing like I want to show this of my culture, of this culture, like, you know what I mean? Is it that, or is it so that Christian kids understand?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there is that aspect of it. Like again, it's always when you're dealing with things that are cultural, that you're always sort of asking that question of, you know, exploitation versus sort of representation, essentially. Right. And I don't have an answer to that for this film. I really don't. I don't have a, and I don't think I doubt that there'd be any sort of consensus, about that. But yeah, certainly if anyone has thoughts, please feel free to, you know,
give us a shout on socials.
'Cause I'd like to know what people think, or people's responses sort of generally. But that's not, well, again, like all that say, like this is not all, like this is still a very fun film, and there are things about it that I do like really, really enjoy and really like I said, you know, I do think that the like I like the way that this parable is set up against this sort of hero quest. Yeah. If that makes sense. I like that this film does this kind of great thing where it sets it up as, you know, this like there's this sense of sort of hero worship, you know what I mean? Like the kids, like they're clearly like Alex has latched onto this story of Judah and the Maccabees, and he relates to it in a very fundamental way. It seems like it's just a part, like it's his personality, his experiences, they click great, like with this story. And like we see this idea of, you know, searching for heroes in real life, like searching for our literary imagined concocted heroes in real life. But then what I like about this film is that it takes it to this place, and, you know, you do have the, you know, like, you know, the wisecracking, you know, rabbi who's aware of this and is sort of steadily leading Alex down the path, and Lamont is sort of aware of this, steadily leading Alex down the path. His mom's trying to do that in not the best of ways, right? But leading Alex down this path of essentially realizing that hero is actually inside of you, right? These heroes that you're searching for outside, like, is actually within you, and not only is it within you, but you have the ability to be that to others. Like like the idea of, you know, anybody can be a Judah, and like whether or not that is actually true, just like human population wise, in terms of, I think, a theme and a message, I really like that, and I think it still holds up. I think it's still a very real, consistent through line in this film, and like, yeah, like it's just fun, and I love watching them play basketball with their yarmulkes on.
Yeah, they commit to that,
and not in like a voyeuristic way. Like I love that I have like a remixed version of the Dreidel song. Yeah, there are just things about this that like still track, and they're still just enjoyable to watch on screen.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you also have the black savior trait in this one. Or I don't know if
because he's not quite magical. He's not quite magical, but he is, you know, the magic is very much coming from the Hebrew Academy. But in this one, like he's very much like, but he is literally a black savior,
literally the Judah,
which is fun.
of the film.
Well, Alex is the Judah in the end. But yes, for most of the film.
For most of the film.
To the point where, like, and there's a whole thing in the film where they're like half of them are like, oh, he is Judah. Like, he actually is Judah.
They're like, how many brothers do you have? What's your mom's name?
And like, when they get all the
and
answers,
it's all anglicized versions.
And the one doubtful one, the mouth.
Yeah.
The one doubtful one's like, okay, but he's obviously not Judah. Like, it's obviously not real. Like that type of through line is great and entertaining. And also, like, this film has some of the best dialogue that we've seen so far. Like, the dialogue in this is actually great.
Yeah, no, this is a really well done one.
It's very, like, paced and very, very well done. Like, Alex is clearly, there's this whole running thing about how Alex, like, should be a lawyer. Because he's which is also why, like, I very much read this as New York when I was little. But I understand, like, Philly is also a large epicenter, so it makes sense that these types of things
would also be happening there. Yeah.
And transfer to all the large epicenters of the globe in their own ways. But yeah, like, all of that is just, like, deeply fun. And it's fun revisiting it, and it has its tinge of nostalgia for me, because it reminds me of, like, being young. In New York, and having big dreams, and, you know, fighting with parents about, you know, letting me have big dreams and all of that. So, and watching that come to fruition. So it was definitely a pleasant ride for sure.
Do you think that you'd show it to the babies?
Yeah, I think it would be part of my, like, holiday season
rotation.
Yeah, man. If for no other reason, so I can sing that dreidel song again. So that then when I sing it in the car, like, my kids will know what I'm talking. They'll probably sing it along with me. You know what I mean? And I'll also teach them the actual dreidel song, because I also really loved that as a kid too. I had very close contact with a lot of Jewish people growing up. I made that very clear. Like, I've said many a Seder. I like eat matzah at Passover, Easter, like, so it's a very close line. So I kind of already had, like, interaction with, like, I remember watching this film as a kid. For me, it was sort of picking up things that I already knew, and that was, like, fun to do, not in any type of way of, you know, belittling, like, the cultural and religious significance of all these, faithful significance of all these things, but just, like, again, that recognition of, like, oh, I know that. I know what that is. I see that. Oh, Judah. I know the Maccabees. Like, I know that story. I know this. I know the whole thing. And yeah, and I think that is something that I would like to share with my kids one day. It's weird because it isn't my culture per se, but because of where I'm from and who I grew up with and around, there are parts of it that do feel very much like home to me. Yeah. If that makes sense. And I don't know what's going to happen with when I have kids, but it's like, I would love to, like, if my kids don't know the dreidel song already, like, I would love to be like, oh, right, I got to teach you that. Because, like, that's part of mommy's holiday season too. You know? I feel like Jewish culture, a lot of Jewish culture is very much imbued in, like, New York culture. Yeah, like it's a part, like, bagels, bro. Like, it's a part. It's literally a part of, like, New York culture, and I think ways that it's easy to kind of overlook, and then the more you start looking, and you're like, wait, you're like, where did that come from? Like bagels are a great example of things. And I mean, even just English language, like, a lot of what we say is, like, high-key Yiddish. He's a schmuck. Like, somebody, a schmear, a schmuck, like, the chutzpah. Like, it's like, we use a lot of, like, Yiddish words in English, which is so funny. And, like, that's beyond New York. That's just, like, you guys probably exactly knew what we were just saying, because it's so common now. But yeah, no, I feel like it's very much imbued in, like, New York culture. But I agree. I would definitely have my kids, like, watch this one. I do feel like it is good just to, like, learn about different religions and different cultures and how people practice things, and how also, like, every religion has their own, like, parables and their own, like, versions of things. It's like, it's not all
your one thing should not be the end all be all.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where a lot of people get lost. Personally.
I don't think like I know you feel it personally. I know for a fact you're not the only person to feel that.
Yeah, I think that's where people get a little lost in the sauce. Get a little bit lost in the sauce. But yeah, I think it's just good to, just know about like other cultures, other places, or sorry, other cultures, other religions, and just how people like, how things are just different. I like it's just good in general to like for kids to pick up on at a very early age.
Yeah, and I think also like how. And I will say, I do know that this is sort of a thing, or I think that this is a thing, that, Hanukkah was a very minor religion in the Jewish faith, and it has become...
Oh, like holiday. Yeah.
So, did I say minor religion?
You said minor religion.
It's one of those days, y'all. It was it was a minor religion. It was a minor holiday in the Jewish faith, and it has developed into something a bit larger in order to compete with Christmas.
Yeah.
I do believe that is.
Yeah, because I think Yom Kippur is like a more.
Oh yeah.
Important,
all the New Year's.
All the high holidays, right?
Yeah, those are. Like, that's what's important. New Year's and like repenting and.
Yeah.
Repenting, but
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I do also think, just literally, just piggybacking off what you were saying, Chelsea, like this, I like also this idea of seeing how potentially understanding that like the same stories can be interpreted or representative of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Because like even like like the Torah is the Old Testament, like that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
But like Christians don't follow that same calendar.
Yeah,
they use the Roman calendar. Christian, you know what I mean? Like it's like all like there are all of these little ways in which.
Or it's
I think
like
exposure to it. Yeah, exposure to it, understanding that there's a baseline of understanding that, it's great for kids to learn that two people can be handed the exact same thing, or, to a degree. Like we can get into translations
in and out of amendments and all that.
We can do the whole thing. But for the in general, two people can be handed the same thing, very similar things, and pick different things from them, draw different things from them, and that does have to do with personal history, personal experience, personal perspective, and like that's just that's a good can to be able to open with a child. I think especially in today's multilingual, multi-faith, multicultural,
multi-everything,
multi-shade world. Like literally just multi. It's a wide myriad, and we should I think it's important that children are given, that we have to give them the tools to operate in that, and not the tools to reject it,
right,
or to try to squash it, or to make everything the same and paint it all one color,
or try to get everybody to think like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like not do that. To
we don't
embrace the multi.
Yeah.
Like multiverse. Like come on, bro. Like we are in. The wider and wider we step back, the more and more we see that like nothing is one thing. Like not even an atom. So. Yeah. Full court miracle.
Yeah.
Nothing is one thing, even oil in a lamp.
There you go. Happy Hanukkah, guys. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.